to grow his business. Something I know about James, he has a sidekick named Calc. He's key to success. It's to hoard toilet paper during the global pandemic.
Thank you.
McDonald's is a good start. You're only one point.
So about me, you know I've got 2 children and a wife. I've got a dog called Bear, but I haven't put his photo up because he really annoys me at the moment. So if I'm still around for the next meeting or the next presentation, there might be a picture of the dog up there if I am more happy with it. If you deal with us from an estate planning perspective, you may come in contact with one of these people. Me, of course, up front, and Kathy and Sydney are the 2 solicitors who work on the matter. You've probably spoken to Enid, who's the follow-up queen, who will hassle you until you complete the instructions or pay your bill. And lest anyone think that I only hire blonde women, I have put our first male employee on, Toby Christensen, who's a law student and does some admin tasks around the office. A couple of you guys in the chapter know Toby, and he's a good operator. So today I thought I'd talk about the basics of estate planning, what really comprises an estate. You can't hear me? I've got a microphone. You can watch the video. No, well, that's for the video. So estate planning, how I approach estate planning is by applying what we call the golden rule. The golden rule is he who has the gold shall make the rules. So people need to understand that when they have a property, they built it up, they should be able to decide where it goes. Now, there are laws and rules around allowing people to bring challenges and otherwise, but I ask people to set that aside when they make a decision about their estate planning. You decide what you want to do and we'll work around that. We'll work out a plan that gets you the outcome that you're seeking. Because in the end, it's your money, you've worked for it or received it from your parents, and you should decide where it goes. If you don't have an estate plan, there is a one-size-fits-all approach, the rules of intestacy. So the government decides, it doesn't go to the government in all cases, but the government will decide where it goes. So the rules of intestacy will apply and your estate will be left in a very specific way, and you will have to pay additional fees in terms of the probate or letters of administration process. Estate planning is not all about death, it's also about loss of capacity and serious injury and illness, so it's always pretty exciting. You need to deal with the decision making while you're alive. So wills deal with your estate after you've died. You need to look at things like enduring powers of attorney and advance health directives, which allow people to make decisions for you or you to make decisions about what sort of health treatment you receive, what happens with your finances, where you are treated, and including up to the withdrawal or withholding of life-supporting and life-sustaining treatment. As I said, wills deal with your estate after you die. So when you're looking at your estate planning, I'll touch on the main assets of your estate and what you need to consider when you're thinking about your wills. Main asset most people own is their house. People may or may not be aware that if you own your house with another person, there's a couple of ways you can hold that. You can hold it as joint tenants, or you can hold it as tenants in common. If you own your property as a joint tenant with another person, generally your spouse, once you die, it doesn't matter what your will says, the property goes to the joint survivor of you. If you own it as tenants in common, it will form part of your estate and you can deal with it under your will. So in a number of circumstances, depending on whether there's people who may have an interest in your estate that you don't want to leave things to, looking at changing the tenancy of your property is an option for you. When you're purchasing property, one of the questions that Nicole will probably ask you, or will definitely ask you, is whether you want to hold your property as tenant in common or as joint tenants. Please read that and please understand what it means, because it saves a lot of hassle at the other end. Other main asset that people have is superannuation. A lot of people don't necessarily appreciate that superannuation doesn't form part of your estate automatically when you die. You don't own your superannuation, it's held by a trustee on trust for you. You have the ability to make certain decisions about the superannuation, which depend, one, on the rules of the fund, and two, whether you've made the right type of determination: a binding nomination, a lapsing binding nomination, a non-lapsing binding nomination, or just a nomination. So again, superannuation can be a very helpful tool in those circumstances I talked about, where you might have people who have an interest in your estate that you don't want to leave things to. You can make binding nominations to make sure that what's in your superannuation fund isn't challenged through the court process. The other main asset of our estate is toilet paper. So toilet paper has extremely high value these days, and when we leave gifts of things like money or toilet paper, Erin, we need to make sure that we deal with it in an appropriate way. If I leave a will saying I leave 5 pieces of toilet paper to my wife, and I die and I've only got 4 pieces of toilet paper, then I have a problem in my estate, the residuary beneficiary. Stay with me, Ash. It will make sense. What I should be doing is leaving a gift that says I leave 20% of all of my toilet paper to my wife. So rather than nominating a specific amount, I should nominate a percentage, because then if I die with less toilet paper than I had when I was alive, the gift won't fail. Common issues with estate planning. Blended families. Obviously, these days we have an increasingly high rate of divorce, and we have an increasingly high number of families, including stepchildren and otherwise. That can create some issues with estate planning, looking at protecting your new spouse's interest versus your children's interest. Balancing entitlements between children. If you have a main asset, things like farmers and otherwise need to look at whether they leave an asset to one child, how they balance those entitlements, and life insurance is a good way of dealing with those sorts of issues. And the one I talked about earlier, excluding beneficiaries, how we approach that. I will rush through these, but the key issues that you need to consider with your estate plan is control. Who makes the decisions? You know where you want things to go, but who's the person who should implement those things? How you fund the decisions. Speaking to your financial planner about insurance is a critical part of your estate planning, and making sure you get it done, because we don't know what's around the corner. Having an estate planning in place will assist greatly. Ideal referrals for me are accountants and financial planners. Thank you. I don't know how that got up there. Are there any questions?
I want to know how much James Howland's getting paid. Is that James as well?
Yeah, that's Calc. No, that's Calc. He's got a mask on. You're not supposed to know what his real identity is. Yes.
For your next slides, could you maybe put writing there so you have the accountant and the financial?
Well, he hasn't got a role yet in the in this little crime-fighting duo. The financial plan is very important. But James is an easier target than Ryan. He's a lot smaller. Again, James is an easier target than Michelle too. So.
I know.
We should have a mixed team up there.
Any other questions? Yes.
It's to do with superannuation.
Yes.
Binding nomination.
Yes.
So when you say that they sit outside of the will,
They can, depending on what nomination you've made.
Final. So, for example, what I've had in the last 2 weeks, husband divorced.
Yep.
Didn't change.
Yep.
New wife thought she was getting it.
Yeah, so the divorce has a specific effect on these things. What can happen, I've acted in a matter a few years ago where a husband had separated from his first wife and they had never finalised an actual divorce. So legally they were married, they'd been apart for 20 odd years. He had shacked up with another woman he was in a de facto relationship with. He died, and again his nomination had been to the first wife that he'd never changed. In those where you don't make a binding nomination, the trustees can exercise a discretion, and in that case they were able to exercise the discretion to pay the benefits to the de facto spouse and not the first wife. Binding nominations need to be updated every 3 years, so generally if you make a binding nomination of a specific person, and usually they have to be a wife or a child or another financial dependent, if you don't update it every 3 years, it will lapse, unless of course you make a non-lapsing binding nomination. But
I'm just going to refer to you.
yeah, I think that's probably the the way to go. Has he died?
Yeah, so.
You need to, yeah. You need, yes. The current partner needs to, yes, she will need to make a claim. She will need to make a claim to the superannuation trustee.
The deceased party was in a relationship with a wife, left in a new relationship. He died. She's now the new wife. She's in a new relationship.
Yes.
And the husband is driving, trying to get the dead husband's money from the ex-partner.
Has the money been paid from the superannuation fund? Yes. So the trustees will seek submissions from all of the relevant parties, and they'll make a decision about it.
I don't know if that would be a hot referral.